My topic for today is our fallen soldiers who accommodate in Vietnam who do not apportion the same reverence as we do now. Vietnam veterans needed to be reverenced and apperceived for what they did back in Vietnam. Today I will discuss how Vietnam veterans were untreated and derided back from the U.S. in 1975. What transpired in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, and denominating some of our veterans who were accommodated in the Vietnam War. When the Vietnam War ended in 1975, the United States did not treat Vietnam veterans disrespectfully. However, the situation was not good for them either. Due to the absence of their units or businesses, soldiers had to return from Vietnam alone. Moreover, the government still has pending promises to fulfill for Vietnam veterans. At that time, the country was experiencing stagflation and economic malaise. As information about wartime atrocities surfaced, there was a national implication of blame and shame placed on Vietnam veterans as participants in the brutal and unsuccessful war. The American military involvement in the Vietnam War persisted from 1964 to 1973, making it the most protracted conflict in the nation's history until it was surpassed by the one in Afghanistan. Service members were usually assigned to year-long tours of duty, and unlike other wars where military units were demobilized together, the returning soldiers from Vietnam usually came back alone. One effect of the war was that Vietnam sent some individuals overseas to fight for 10 years. According to Jerry Lemke, sociologist and author of The Spitting Image, Myth, Memory, and the Legacy of Vietnam, the country's collective emotion was divided during the Vietnam War. Lemke explains that although some families may have wanted to celebrate a loved one's return from Vietnam, the political climate made it difficult to do so publicly. This was particularly difficult for families who had lost a loved one in the war. In addition, it would not be appropriate to celebrate a homecoming when others in the community were grieving. The soldiers who served in Vietnam were seen as symbols of defeat, as it was the first time in American history that they had lost a major overseas war. According to Lemke, this made it difficult for Americans to accept and celebrate returning soldiers, leading to a lack of parades and recognition for their service. Many veterans accommodated in Vietnam did not get to apportion their stories. Thousands of airborne troops were preserved from death in May 1967 by an extraordinary rescue operation led by Army Helicopter Commander Charles S. Kettles. In 2016, President Obama presented Lieutenant Colonel Charles Kettles, U.S. Army, the Medal of Honor for noticeable courtliness. Navy Nurse Corps veteran Rear Admiral Frances Buckley was accommodated on a hospital ship off Vietnam in 1968. She housed stateside during the Korean War and overseas in Rota, Spain. Donald Scott's military vocational aspirations were modest, but he rose steadily to become a brigadier general. But, haplessly, race often left him on a plateau or saddled with disputable assignments. In conclusion, Vietnam veterans have not been treated deferentially or scarcely mentioned when accommodated in Vietnam. However, Vietnam veterans should still need to recollect. I have verbalized how untreated Vietnam veterans were in the past, how each individual's soldiers adapted their right to be remembered, and how it affected our economy in the 1970s. In the cessation, many stories of what transpired to Vietnam veterans are still never told by their history. Suppose we operate to accolade the legacy of their lives and the sacrifices the Vietnam veterans made. In that case, we must share the stories with others in the utilization so they get the reverence needed to be honorable.